Oh wow. That just blew my mind. Ugh. Okay, that is one of the laziest things I think I've ever seen. You didn't blow your mind, you blew your neck. And where's the blood, the skin, the bone, the brain matter? No, just an explosion? And why the ground explosion? That makes no sense. And I'm sure that plenty of you have seen that type of thing for various different low to no budget type of thing. From YouTube to some like independent movies, they actually use such basic effects that are just mind-blowingly bad. So today we're going to take a look at doing various different explosions like that, how to blow a person's mind from doing just the explosion all the way up to making it as bloody and gory as we can. I'm Ollamh, and this is Tutorial Tuesday.
My thoughts have never been clearer. I see what you're doing to me now. They lie, they steal, they fooled us. Deep down I probably knew this. I think I will be holding on to the one thing that I know is stronger. Love is blind and no one's perfect.
So, okay, we need to go back a little bit before my other self blew his mind. So, just a moment. There we go. Much better. Okay, so the basics of it, we're gonna start off really basic, and that's number one, do not use a ground explosion. I know a lot of people want that nuclear explosion, they want that mushroom cloud that goes up and just kind of dissipates up and stuff like that, and that's great, but it's not happening at the ground level. Problem is with those explosions, it starts at the ground level, and if the ground level is here, the bomb is in your neck, not in your brain, not in your mind. So, first thing we need to do is we need like an explosion ball or an eagle eye view of that explosion. And we want it centered around the head. We want it centered basically about where the brain is going to be. And of course the brain takes up most of your skull, so you can really put it anywhere the head is, but you really need it to be in the head to start from the head and go from there. The second most basic way to do it, and the most basic mistake that people make, is they don't use the blending modes. They just drag and drop, and there are so many special effects sites out there that really, this is what they promote. Just drag and drop, drag and drop. You don't need to do anything else. Just throw it on your footage and you're done. And that's not really the case, because with something like this, especially with explosions and anything that's got like a light around it, you're gonna have an edge. And you need to get rid of that edge, otherwise it looks fake as shit. And yeah, it looks bad. So going with a blending mode of like a light, an ad or a screen effect makes it look more realistic. Now, to make it a little bit more realistic, you can add like a glow on the person's shoulders and chest, a slight glow from behind. Those are things that you can do to kind of add to it and really make it just a little bit more, give it a bit more reality, a bit more blending. Okay, so here we have the basic composition with the original explosion. Now, the special effects that I use come from productioncrate.com. So they're a little bit better. The whole point of the blending mode is actually kind of moot at this point because of the fact that we have the dark smoke and stuff like that. Lighting and everything doesn't really look right. It would if it was just the explosion, but because it isn't, we're not going to need to deal with that. So the first thing we want to do to make a normal explosion is we want to go in and we want to get the aerial explosion that is similar to that. So we're going to move it over here. We are going to trim it down to the same 35%. And we are going to move it so that it really comes up around where the head is. Now, I did shorten this one, so we are going to need to come in here and say enable time remapping and move this down to about the same spot. So we can come in here, make sure that this is down to the same spot. And it is. So now we have just this boom there. So we can get rid of that initial explosion. And now we have, boom, a really nice, obvious explosion. That's what we want. That is coming from the head itself. It's coming from the head. I mean, we can detail it out even more if we want to just get that first initial explosion. Like, let's do it right on the nose so it's kind of in the back of the head. But just boom. And then as it clears, we have just the neck meat. And that is one of the other things that I did. I actually put just like a small little shank cut. Very basic, not something that's really something that's going to blend in that well, but just something so that it's not just like this empty void there. There's actually showing some meat. So that would be your most basic. Just boom. And we're done. Now we can, as I pointed out, we can actually say, let's take the clean part of this. We're going to duplicate it and we're going to make it so that it starts right as that starts. So actually, you know what? Let's remove that. So let's come back to where this starts. The first frame. Actually, let's go to the second frame. Now we're going to duplicate that. Then we're going to cut the before part. And we are going to draw out a very simple mask for here. So down around the chest, around the arms, the shoulders, stuff like that. And we're just going to say, boom. Very simple, very easy. Now we're going to do a tent on that. And the white, we want the same color as this. And the black, we want to start with the same color as that. But we then want to take the brightness down probably to about 50%? 25%. Let's try 25%. 25% looks good. So that's going to be there. Now we want to say take the effects. No, we're going to want to take the mask. And we're going to want to feather that out so that it has some fall off.
Now, if we just do it as that, it looks really wonky. But if we say lighten, or even maybe just an add, if we do an add, it's going to be really bright. If we do a screen, that looks all right. So now but it's not full brightness. It's full bright from the very beginning, and that's not what we want. So we want to animate the opacity so that, boom, opacity 100% there. Then here's where the fire really dies out. So now we're going to say opacity. We're going to say the opacity is at about 15% here. Then as the explosion grows, it brightens up. So we actually want the full bright right there. And then as the fire dies out, we want it to die out as well. So down to 0 there. So now it brightens as the explosion happens and then darkens as that goes away. Now we can I also want to go ahead and animate the tint. So now we have the tint colors are selected there because here it actually is more of an orange. So here we want to say, boom. Actually, let's go ahead and pull that orange. But again, we want this down to about 25. So now as that goes from a bright yellow down to an orange, so those changes should be about finished right about there. Maybe one frame past. So now we have, boom. And as it goes to pure smoke, you have just the pure smoke. I really like that. So that is what we're going to do so that's going to be our finished one. Now, of course, we're going to go in and do a lot more in our second pass. We're going to really just crank this up insanely much.
Oh, wow. That just blew my mind. Now, to really make it bloody and gory and a lot more realistic, like I said before, you are blowing the mind, the brain, inside the brain, which means you're forcing the skin and blood vessels to explode out. You're causing the skull to explode out, and you're causing the brain matter to go flying. So, that's going to require a certain level of layering. You're going to want the brain. On top of the brain, you're going to want the skull. On top of the skull, you're going to want the blood. On top of the blood, you're going to want the skin. And all of this has to go out and just forcefully blast out from that explosion before the fire and smoke. So, you want to set them up so that they kind of deteriorate and explode and just separate and just go flying. The flesh, you're going to want rounded edges on it. The skull, you're probably going to want to keep sharp edges because the bone isn't going to curve as it breaks. It's going to snap. The brain matter, you're going to want soft edges again. And then the blood can be just a layering of blood squibs. So we get something kind of like this.
Okay, so here we have our finished composition that shows a lot more than just the basic thing. So let's kind of go through it here for a moment, shall we? So we've got a lot of stuff that just you may not be sure what it is you're really looking at, and that's completely understandable. Because you've got a foreground, a background, and just, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to deal with here. So let's take a look at the foreground. The foreground has our head explosion. Now, this probably is going to look really, really weird by itself, so let's take it piece by piece. I actually layered up the different things. So we have the brain, and that's on a shatter. So let's take a deeper look into it. So if we go deep into it, we've got the brain PNG, which is, your basic thing. It's just the brain set front and center, full size. But then we go with brain boom, which takes that brain, shrinks it back down to the point where it would fit inside my head, and then has a shatter effect on it. We can come in here and we can see the shatter effect. The shape is actually just set at bricks. So it just goes boom and explodes. Now in the full head explosion, we have the brain boom, where it actually expands out as it blows up and kind of moves so that the brain stays in the same place. And I did the same thing with the skull. So we've got skull with the brain in it, skull explodes, brain explodes, boom, both kind of fade out. Then we have 4 different blood splatters. So the blood is on top of and happens before the brain and the skull. And then we have a copy of the head, which starts off there and then just explodes and turns red as it explodes out. That is the basic layering that I did. Everything's with a shatter, everything has a roughen edges on it to kind of create like almost a tearing effect for the face, kind of, not so smooth edges and everything for the skull and the brain and stuff like that. Now, the foreground and the background and the foreground, that is actually a production crate script that if you look at, let's take off the backgrounds here. So the background, the first background, the bottom background is just the explosion. The foreground is the actual blood and stuff. And then on top of that, there's another background that is actually a light wrap. So, as you're looking at it, as the explosion happens, you actually have the light from the explosion wrapping around all the little bits. So around the skull, around the blood, and everything like that. Now I did kind of go on after that and add a few things extra, and that is blood splats that hit and some gore that hits as well. I'm not entirely sure on those, honestly, because those are a little bright. Those are kind of bright. But of course, we could come in here and we could say, okay, the gore, we want that. Actually, not a tint, really. We want more of I think a brightness and contrast should work fine. So the brightness we actually want to bring down because everything is kind of this really dark. So what if we take it down to negative 100? That gives it a really dark splotch. Same with the blood. That matches the blood that's spurting out a bit more. Because the blood that's spurting out is very, very, very dark. So the blood actually, the blood that lands on the screen, we may actually want to take down even more. So if we take that all the way down, what if we ramp up the contrast a bit? That looks pretty good. So now we want to put the same one there for that blood splat. And then, like I said, we have a bit of meat landing there. We could do the same there. And we actually have a third bit of meat here. Maybe not quite so much contrast on that. Maybe not quite so dark. Because that one's kind of off to the side. So yeah, and then as that kind of wafts away, you have everything just kind of starting to sag down. And then, of course, what you're going to want to do so that everything goes out at the same time is take the last frame, say time, freeze frame, and then just extend that out all the way to the end. Now, I'm not that familiar with doing the freeze frames and stuff. I don't know if we say time, freeze frame on last frame.
Running up the mountain and climbing a tree, twisted like a snake and busy like bees. Don't know what the is wrong with me. Don't know what the is wrong with me. Pumping up the volume to 90 degrees.
So is that just
Until the song till I drop to my knees. Don't know what the is wrong with me. Don't know what the is wrong with me. Boy, how you know you got that
okay? Nope. It is actually still playing through on that. Good. Because that's what we want. So, okay, so we can just come up here, say, okay, you, time, freeze frame on last frame, and then we can just stretch that out to the end. So that should have everything there if we add all of this stuff back in. So now, boom, we're seeing just this massive bloody mess. And like I said, this is a lot. This is really doing a lot to really get the point across that this person's brain just exploded. And you're probably not going to want to do that for a lot of shots just because it takes a lot of setup. Of course, you could kind of fudge it a little bit as far as once you have the basic setup, but it is still a lot to deal with all of that. So it's probably not something that you're ever really going to do a lot. But I've always said that in certain situations like this, whenever I do a really detailed thing, I always want to put in more detail than people are ever really going to notice. Like the fact that the brain is actually there and it's exploding. The skull, the whole 9 yards, that's something that most people aren't going to see. It's really difficult to see, especially when it's just going to be just a few frames long. But I like putting in details that if somebody really deep dives into it, they're going to see all that detail. But that would be what I would do for a really detailed brain explosion. Really, I think that took me about an hour to layer and get everything set up and done properly. Again, not something that you're going to do on a regular basis. So let's jump back to In the Warehouse and finish up, shall we?
Oh wow. That just blew my mind. Oh wow. That just blew my mind. So now you've seen not only the end results, but how to do it in something like After Effects. It can be done, these types of things can be done in various different programs. You don't have to use After Effects. They kind of make it easiest. A lot of the plugins, a lot of the effects are built into After Effects, which makes it easier. But again, you can find add-ons and effects packages and stuff like that for whatever video editing software you use. So play around with it, get it to look good, get it to look, even if you do just the simple, just an explosion, nothing else, you can do it without having to, without really having to put in a whole lot of effort, and you can make it look so much better than most of the people do. So what do you think? Do you think this is something you'll use? Do you think you'll just go with the cheap and easy drag and drop and you don't really give two craps? Or do you want to make it a little bit better, make that production quality better, make it look a bit more realistic, and put some effort into it in order to really impress your audience? Do you think it's worth the time, or is it just kind of, nobody's really going to notice, nobody's going to really care? I'm always interested to know how people view these types of things. As always, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to prod the subscribe button down below so that you can stay tuned for more from Ollamh Productions.
If you wanna see some crazy
Cheerio!
you should meet me and my friends. Even though we got
Hey,
no money,
thanks for watching to the end. If you like our videos, you can help the channel grow by giving it a like and sharing it for others to enjoy. If you want to help the channel out even more, you can find our Patreon link right down there. And of course, other videos here to enjoy yourself.